in this lesson, we'll draw out the main shape for the wing. So now it's time to go ahead and create the wings. So let's create one wing, and we'll create it from the top using splines to begin with, and then we'll look at some ways that we can shape it. So the first thing that I'll do is go ahead and just grab whatever type of a spline you want to actually use. I want to have a little bit more control over the spline, so I'm going to use a Bezier spline. And let's go ahead and start to draw out our wing, and I'm just going to draw it out sort of in sections. So I'm going to have a section that's kind of up here where the wing kind of comes back and then comes back in here, and then let's go ahead and create sort of a wing shape coming back in here, and you don't have to be too exact with this. And then I want it to sort of come back in here, and I'll close it. Now, wasn't too careful with that, so now I'm going to go in and just modify this wing. So I want it to extend out here and have this sort of front shape that we have for the wing. So I'm going to go ahead and just refine that curve a little bit more. As we start to come out here, I want to go ahead and tighten up this point out here just a little bit so it's a little bit more sharp. And then this one, I want to go ahead and I want to actually make this a soft line, and then I'll harden it back up. So I don't want it completely sharp. So maybe something like that, and I can rotate this a little bit if I want to kind of tighten up that line there. Okay, now as far as the wing back here, let's go ahead and make this sort of curve back. I just want to make a nice smooth transition back here. So we can kind of move and rotate these until we get something that is kind of closer to what we want for this main shape, and we can spend a little bit more time on it. And I want to have this kind of little notch coming out here, and I can sort of tighten that up a little. Okay, I also want the sort of strut to come back along the wing, and I'm actually going to use another spline for this. So we'll just use a rectangle, kind of put it in position here. Okay, and then I just want to extend this out along, in this case, the width. Go from the sort of the front line here, and I'll extend it out so there's a little bit of a corner there. And let's make it a bit thinner and a bit longer. So we'll make it extend maybe twice as far as the capsule there. So something like that. And I want it to extend out just like that, that little strut coming out. Now I also want to have the fin back here. So let's go ahead and add another rectangle to the mix. We'll go ahead and bring it down in here. And let's go ahead and make editable. And then we can come in here and edit this. And let's actually pull this out a little bit. So something like that. Okay. I want to round off the corners, so I'm just going to go to chamfer that, which is a nice way to kind of curve that line around there. Let's do the same thing to the back. I'll go ahead and select this, right click, chamfer, and I'll just increase that radius a little bit. Oops. There we go. Okay, I also want to create a hole in the center. And so before I do that, I'm going to modify this just a little bit. Let's take all these points, and I just want to kind of move those back a little bit, and then kind of pull this one in just a little. And let me go ahead and kind of scale this down. Scale this down a little bit. And I just want to get a nice smooth curve here. bring this in a little. Okay, so I want a hole for this fan, because this is going to be sort of a vertical takeoff and land, and I want to have these sort of fans in here to be able to take off inside the actual wing. So let's go ahead and add a circle, and we'll put it into position here. And go ahead and increase that. Now if you take a look at this, I've actually built it backwards, so all we have to do is go ahead, take all of our splines. Let's go ahead and group those. Okay, and then we can just rotate them around. So I can go ahead and rotate that 180 degrees and then just place it from the top view. Okay, so this is actually the front, so I'm going to go ahead and move that over. Here we go. So something like that. You don't have to put it in the exact position just yet, but you can get it close. So think of this as the opening in the wing. All right, so let's go ahead and start to put this stuff together. So we'll go ahead and grab the spline mask, and let's take these three. So we'll take this one, and everything but the circle. Oops. Put it in the spline mask. And actually, we can take, turn this off. We can take this one and actually combine them together. And then in our spline mask, we'll say A union B along Y to create our new piece here. Okay, now let's go ahead and make this editable. We'll get rid of our original splines, so we're left with this. Now we can come in here and soften up some of these points. So for instance, if we have a point here, we can go ahead and chamfer that. Okay, and if you wanted to do the same thing, oops, same thing here. Okay, just kind of smooth that out a little. And if you wanted to kind of smooth this out on the back, you could do the same thing. Okay, and we'll do the same thing here. Okay. So now we've got one whole wing shape. Let's take it with the circle and go ahead and connect objects. Oops, we're going to make the circle editable here. And then we'll go ahead and connect objects and delete. Now we can start to add some thickness to our wing. So we'll go ahead and add an extrude NURBS and drop the wing inside there. Okay. Let's go ahead and give our wing some thickness in this direction. And we'll make it just a little bit thicker than we'll eventually want it to be. We'll go ahead and give it some thickness here. For the caps, I want to use fillet caps. Okay, and let's turn on our wire here. And I want to increase the radius and also the number of divisions for that. Okay. Can also increase the subdivisions under object, give us some more subdivisions. And then on the caps, you can see right now it's using n-gons. We can change that to quadrangles or triangles. We can turn on regular grid, which will give us more of a tessellated kind of clean shape, although the edges, you can see it has to work a little bit to keep those good. But we can increase the width to give us a little bit more larger geometry, so it's not quite so dense. Okay, if we're going to leave it as is, then we wouldn't have to go through this. But let's go ahead and take this down a little bit. But if we're planning on taking this and turning it into a polygon, then we can manipulate this and turn it into, give it a little bit more resolution here before we actually turn it into a polygon, so it has some polygons there versus just a big n-gon. Now we don't have any resolution back along here, so I'm going to actually go ahead and add a few points in here. So go to Point Tool, and let's go to Create Point, and I'm just going to create a few points along this line, and we'll do the same thing over here in kind of corresponding areas. Okay, and let me go ahead and do the same thing over here on the side. Turn that back on. So now we'll have a little bit more flexibility when we're working with it. Okay, so once you have the main shape built, you can play around with your still with your radius. You can see how that changes. You might increase that a little bit so it's a little bit more rounded. Okay, play around with those values. But in the next lesson, we're going to come in and actually start to deform this a little bit more. So we'll convert it down and start manipulating it that way. So we'll go ahead and do that next.